Friends, all saints give of themselves entirely to God and love God with all their heart, soul, strength and mind, and their neighbours as themselves. Those are the characteristics of saints, of God's holy people. Since the days of early on our penal colony, Australians have been typically anti-authority. We don't like others telling us what to do, and it's probably worse now than in earlier times. Parents struggle to exercise authority in the home, teachers in the classroom, police on our streets. The law courts struggle even to exercise authority in the halls of justice. We claim our independence. So we want the right to run our lives our own way. We don't want to be beholden to anybody. But friends, I'm not so sure that Australians are too different from anyone else. And hasn't it always been the same? Right back to the garden, didn't Adam and Eve first claim their independence from God? That was the issue in the garden, was it not? We don't want anyone to rule over us. So this morning we're challenged on two things from this gospel passage. The question of authority, who is calling the shots? And the question of love, where is our heart? Who is our first love? And what flows from that? So first of all, who is calling the shots? Let me just set this passage in its context. You'll remember that Jesus is heading towards Jerusalem, where he knows he'll be mistreated and killed. But he heads there anyway in obedience to his Father and in his love for you. Last week at the end of chapter 10, we saw the healing of Bartimaeus. And then at the start of chapter 11, Jesus has processed into Jerusalem with a great throng of people from Galilee who had joined him and were singing his praises. But it was all downhill from there. He curses a fruitless fig tree as a living sign of the curse of God on fruitless Israel. And he clears the temple of money changers and swindlers, again a sign of the judgment of God on Israel. And the reaction to this is swift and sharp. Just have a look back with me at chapter 11, verse 18. The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him. And the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. So the confrontation between Jesus and the religious leaders is heating up. And they question Jesus' authority and lay traps for him, verbal traps, trying to trip him up so that they have a reason to arrest him and to bring him to condemnation. But Jesus always has consistently brilliant answers or questions for all their questions, which usually either embarrass those who've asked the questions or trap them right back. So have a look with me at verse 13. Later they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. This is a setup from start to finish. Luke's version makes that even more clear. Keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something that he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. Who did the religious leaders send? Spies. What was their modus operandi? Pretending to be sincere. The aim to catch Jesus in something he said so that they could get rid of him. In their pretense and in their great foolishness, they opened their spiel with flattery. Did you see that in verse 14? Have a look with me. Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. What is the irony here? That they might be insincere in their intent, but they are entirely accurate with their words. It is true, he wasn't swayed by others, and he did teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. If only they really believed that and took hold of it. But after the flattery comes the trick question at the end of verse 14. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? Oh, we'll get him there, that's for sure. He won't expect this. He won't see this coming. We've got him. But of course, in verse 15a, Jesus knew their hypocrisy. He knew it. He saw right through them and right through their question. Have you ever been found out where you've been trying to be cunning or sneaky or duplicitous. Luke has, at this same point in his gospel, he saw through their duplicity. Here in verse 15b, have a look with me. Jesus returns the serve. "Why are you trying to trap me?" he said. "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." They brought the coin. He asked them, "Whose image is this and whose inscription?" Now, of course, the image is that of Caesar, and the inscription describes him as divine, a god. So what will Jesus say? Surely Jesus can't be a party to this sort of blasphemous, outrageous blasphemy. But his answer is brilliant. "Then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. If the coin bears Caesar's image, then it belongs to him. Pay whatever taxes you owe. If it bears his image, it's his. It's only coinage. He's only a man. His claim to be divine is entirely false. But as for giving to God what is God's, well, if the coin bore Caesar's image and inscription, he's asking them by inference, whose image do you bear? Inference, you were made in the image of God. You bear his image and inscription. You are his. And you need to give to God what belongs to God, that is, your entire self. You are not your own. In fact, you never were. But for us, this side of the cross, we see even more clearly that we've been bought with a price. Do you remember from 2 weeks ago? That Jesus paid our ransom by his life laid down, by the way he served us. We are his. Who is calling the shots in your life? You're not just a person on your own. You bear God's image. Jesus has redeemed and rescued you to make you his own. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. And the response from those who heard Jesus' masterful reply, verse 17, and they were amazed at him. Of course they were. His answer is brilliant. He's escaped their trap. He's shown it for what it is. He's exposed it. And there is nowhere for his opponents to turn. And that prepares us for the second part of our passage, where we skip over verses 18 to 27. There they tried to trap him about the resurrection. He has a brilliant answer for that trap also. And we come to another, maybe trap, the scholars are divided, about which is the most important of all the commandments. So secondly, who is your first love? Have a look with me at verse 28. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given a good answer, that is about the resurrection, he asked Jesus, of all the commandments, which is the most important? Now, the rabbis had added up the various laws of the Old Testament and found there was something like 613, and this teacher's question, which is the most important, was often discussed by the experts in the law. What would Jesus say? Jesus points not just to one commandment, but two. He quotes firstly from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then he adds, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, love your neighbour as yourself. And Jesus comments, there is no commandment greater than these. What is the common theme? Love. Together, these two express the entire nature of God's will for us. Our lives are to be centered around love for God, to give him the worship and the honor and the due and the focus which is rightly his. And you and I are to love God with our entire beings, all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, all our strength. It's not casual, is it? It's not half-hearted. It's not just out there on the side of our lives, on the fringe, but it's the very center. Love for God flowing through our entire lives and driving everything we do, all that we're on about, all of the time. Can I ask you, do you love the Lord your God with all your heart? With all the devotion of your affections? And with all your soul, that is your entire self? completely who you are, with all your mind, that is with all your intellect, and what you do with it, is that given over to the Lord? And with your strength, do you have this love for God with every last bit of energy that you have? That's how we are to love God. That's what all saints do. To love God with our whole beings. And then our neighbours as ourselves. Let there be no doubt we love ourselves. For the main part, we feed ourselves and water ourselves and clothe ourselves and protect ourselves. We look after ourselves. The question is, do we love others in that same way? Do we ensure that we are as giving and thoughtful to others as we are to ourselves? Do we love and serve others as we would want to be loved and served? Do we look out for the needs of others as we see that our needs are met? Do we seek to love the unlovely? Do we put the needs of others before our own? So amazingly searching and revealing of the true nature of ourselves. Of course, we cannot love like this on our own, in our own strength, with our own resources. Of course not. We cannot love like this unless we've received Jesus' love for us, who loved us by laying down his life for us. And once we have received and we grasp the significance of the way that he has first loved us, only then can we begin to love him and love our neighbours as we ought. Love for God and love for neighbour, empowered and inspired by the love of God, seen at the cross and his resurrection. Elsewhere, the Bible says that that love is the fulfillment of the law. You want to know what the law is about? It's about love. Friends, love is to be the total expression of our lives. It is what defines us as saints, as those who've been made holy by Jesus. That's why Jesus says they will know that you are Christians by your love. And that's why, friends, it's completely tragic when Christians behave in an unloving manner, either in the community of God's people or out there in the community, and people know about it. Then the damage that is done to the nature of the reputation of the church, the nation, the reputation of ourselves, the reputation of the very gospel itself is very damaging when we do not love. Now, just one or two things as I close I want you to notice. The man who asks the question offers Jesus a critique of his answer. Did you notice that? He comes and says, verse 33, "Yes, Jesus, good answer. To love God with all your heart and understanding and strength, and to love your neighbour as yourself is more important than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices." Isn't that brilliant? He's beginning to see that it's all about relationship, and all those old traditions and practices are entirely secondary to love. And Jesus said to the man, "You're not far from the kingdom." You get it. You've got it. You're getting it. Oh, we need to grasp this more clearly, friends, that all our liturgical practices and traditions are entirely secondary to love. What a nonsense to get all the liturgical practices right and yet have no love for each other or for God. The second thing I want you to notice as I close is right at the end of verse 34. No one dared to ask him any more questions. They saw that the word traps that they laid for him were getting them nowhere. He was too brilliant for them. But they pursued their evil intent by other means. And within days, Jesus was dead. Well, let me recap and bring things to a close. To whom do you belong? You bear the image of God. You are his, bought with the precious life, death, and resurrection of the Lord Jesus. Give to God what is God's. And who is your first love? Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength, and love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." Amen.